Okay, so I know many of you have come here with the expectation of me talking about a particular author. An author who, in the past, I wrote and recorded a whole video about, proclaiming my admiration and love for his work. I'm not going to talk about him yet, at least not right this second. Instead, I'm going to talk a little bit lighter about my own weird experiences and the concept of authors behaving badly. So many years ago, I met an author in person, and that author asked me to review her book. It hadn't come out yet, it was a proof copy, and I did. I read it, and I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. So if I'm being honest now, the book was only a 2-star read for me. But because I had met the author in person, and I was trying to be generous with my review, because they were a new author, it was their first book. We were not friends by any means. I had only met this person once before, and in that one meeting they thrust this proof upon me. And she did so because she heard about my following. Now, I have a really decent following on YouTube nowadays, but back then I was looking around less than 10,000 people, I'm assuming. Now, for clarity's sake, this author gave me the book for an unpaid review, but despite it, being unpaid, I've always done unpaid reviews, I still felt obligated in some way to be nice to them because I wanted to be supportive of a new author. Now, I didn't even write my review out yet, I just gave it the star rating, and within a couple of hours of my rating going live, the author, who must have been watching their Goodreads ratings, emailed me and asked for me to return the copy of the proof to them. Because she said, quote, she would rather it had gone to someone who appreciated it. Ironically, I hadn't got the book to give back to her. I had actually finished the book when I was staying with my ex's mother at the time, and I gave it to her because I thought it was of interest to her, and she loved it. So I told the author this. I couldn't give them back the proof because my ex's mother had now got the copy and she was enjoying it immensely. I never heard back from that person again, thank God. But I remember feeling really unsettled by the situation. I understand that we are all protective of our creative works, but as I tried to tell the author, reviews are not feedback forms. Reviews are for readers, not for authors, and taste is entirely subjective. I don't think people really realise how authors' reputations tend to precede them, especially in book influencer spaces and bookselling, the bookselling world in general, because booksellers really get to see the sassy personalities when preparing for a book event. So I wasn't even a bookseller for very long. I only worked as a bookseller for 5 years, and yet even during my short period of time, I met quite a few authors behind the scenes. And I had, unfortunately, more bad experiences with authors than good ones. Obviously, they always say, never meet your heroes for that reason. However, I did have good experiences. As I always say, promote what you love, don't bash what you hate. And there are some good experiences which really shine through. I mean, rest in peace, P.D. James was one of the most fantastic women I ever heard speak. I met, she was wonderful, I adored her. Sebastian Faulks was incredibly charming, and he also knew how to spell my name, because when I said it, he was like, is it Cinzia? And I was like, yes, and he was like, my best friend is called Cinzia. So I like to pretend that I'm his best friend in a secret reality. Though by far the most thoughtful and attentive author I ever met, hands down, was Ben Ockery, who ended up writing personalised messages to me in each of the books I brought to sign. I got quite a big collection of his. I think I had 4 books. And what was lovely about him is he spoke to me. He got right in there. And at the time, I was suffering from quite obvious anorexia. So he asked me kind of very gently about it. And when I told him, he took the books and he said, I'm going to write you some recipes to help you with your anorexia. And honest to God, they're poems in my book about feeding the soul. Genuinely some of the most beautiful things anyone has ever written to me. And that was just in a meet and greet after the show. He took the time to talk to me enough to have that, and he had a long queue and he was doing it for everyone. So Sebastian Faulks and Ben Ockery, don't you dare make this video age like milk because you are wonderful. Don't upset me. So authors, as I just demonstrated, have a position and the grace to be some of the most life-changing people a person can interact with. But many of them choose to kind of make bad impressions because they forefront their egos over making connections. And that includes not with just the fans, but the booksellers and people working in the back end. Now, this isn't just an in reality kind of experience. If you scroll through Goodreads enough over the years, as I have done, you will have seen various book reviewers share kind of similar stories with authors blocking reviewers or unfriending them after the reviewer gave them an average or bad review of their book, even if the reviewer didn't even receive the copy for free. They bought the book with their own money. Some authors have taken that kind of personally. And then I heard horror stories about things that happened behind other people's backs, because there are like WhatsApp groups, and back in the day there was Twitter private DM groups with authors gossiping back and forth about other people with kind of a cliquey mentality. And here's my public service announcement really for this video before I get into the darker stuff. If you're part of a group and it features any element of tearing another person down or mocking someone else, stand up for something better and stop being part of the problem. Adult bullying, stupid adult bullying like that, perhaps it's more the competitive nature of digital spaces that has transformed this. I'm hoping there are more healthier spaces out there. These examples are not that big a deal. You know, they weren't very nice examples that I've seen and heard about, but they're certainly not mainstream discussions, unlike Kate Crane. But before we get into the discussion further, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one wonderful website platform empowering individuals to create their online web presence or launch their passion projects. Combining 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology to unlock your strongest creative potential, Squarespace's design intelligence empowers everyone and anyone to build a beautiful website tailored to their unique needs and craft a bespoke digital identity to use across their entire online presence. I originally started off with blogging back in the day, and now I'm using my Squarespace website to launch my whole writing career and using it for writing workshops and things like that, and you can swap so easily. I don't have to recreate a whole website from scratch. Actually, transition is a really fun process. And you too can run your whole business easily on Squarespace as a one-platform solution, from receiving payments for products that you sell to donations from people who just want to give you a tip because they like your content or your newsletter, which you can also set up on Squarespace. They have their email templates on there, and you can just collect subscribers for your newsletter on there and send out your weekly newsletter without having to leave the website. Also, it's really easy for customers to pay you using popular payment methods like Klarna or Apple Pay, Afterpay and ClearPay. And if you're a brick or mortar business, or maybe you are a personal trainer or a life coach, Squarespace has activity scheduling facilities, which allows for your customers to book appointments with you online. So if you want to expand your business or just build a beautiful website for your blogging leisure, then go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you are ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/lady of the library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So in 2023, the bookish world was set alight with a scandal of an aspiring fantasy author, Kate Crane, who review bombed, i.e. negatively reviewed books on mass scale, of other fantasy books by primarily women and people of colour. So Canadian author, and my apologies, I have tried to write this down phonetically, I've got Shiran J. Chiao. They tweeted, quote, "If you, as a debut author, are going to make a bunch of fake Goodreads accounts, 1-star bombing fellow debuts you're threatened by, can you at least not make it so obvious?" When I heard about this news, I was like, I have seen this happen. I've heard about this happening, so many cases, but the fact that someone did it on such a big scale that it was noticeable is atrocious. And of course, speculation began buzzing online until Shiran released the name of the suspected review bomber, Crane, along with a Google document featuring the evidence of Crane's many fake accounts and all the authors that she'd written counterfeit reviews about. Now, Crane came clear about perpetuating the review bombing, citing a struggle with depression and substance abuse for the reason of her psychological breakdown. Though, as many of us who are experiencing or have experienced psychological breakdowns would know, spite, aggression and cruelty against others aren't really behaviours that we usually succumb to. And her publisher wasn't buying that excuse either. And yes, you heard me right, her publisher, because this girl had actually made it. Unlike millions of aspiring authors out there, which I'm sure many of you are, this woman had actually attained a book deal that millions of us have spent years striving for, and her book was set to be released by Ray Books, a sci-fi and fantasy imprint of Penguin Random House, in spring 2024. But this news resulted in her and her book being dropped by the publisher. I know what you're thinking. I feel it too. As someone who has pitched 3 books countless times over the past decade and never even gotten a response, the fact that this woman destroyed her prospects at that point in the process completely blows my mind. Her book was not even out yet. She had a publishing deal just months away from being a reality, and she still felt so insecure that she attempted to destroy the reputation of other books, because apparently that made hers look better. I don't understand the logic of that. Who was next? Was she hoping to take down the reputation of Adrian Tchaikovsky or Tolkien or George R.R. Martin? Good books speak for themselves. It's not a comparison game, which also blows my mind as to why the book community is so competitive anyway. That doesn't make sense. People don't just pick one book to read in a genre and then refuse to read any other book. They read multiple books, and review bombing would have done more damage to her sales than not. Because hear me out, say her book was similar in nature to those that she review bombed, which I'm assuming was the case because otherwise she wouldn't have felt threatened by them. Well, Goodreads has a section which says readers who enjoyed this book also enjoyed, and then it lists books of a similar nature. So if her book was similar to those books, her book would have been recommended alongside those authors, basically free advertising. But by review bombing them, she would have distanced her own book from being recommended and thus lost advertising and adjacent readership. So another public service announcement. Tearing other people down does not improve the quality of your work. Spend more time honing your craft instead of trying to destroy the reputation of other people, because the quality of their work will speak for itself. It doesn't go lower just because you smear its name. Which leads me on to an ominous post by an author, Susan Meachin. The author posted a message on Facebook in 2023 which read, quote, "I debated on how to do this a million times and still not sure if it's right or not. There's going to be tons of questions. I'm in a good place now, and I'm hoping to write again. Let the fun begin." Well, that seems innocent enough, and you'll be reasonable in being shocked to hear that that post became kind of international news within a few days. And you'd be right to be shocked. If Susan hadn't announced her death just 3 years prior. You see, in 2020, Susan Meachin allegedly killed herself due to online bullying, according to her daughter, who posted from her mother's account. Except it seems to be that her daughter did no such thing. Susan did it herself, although Susan tried to convince the internet that she didn't fake her own suicide. Instead, her family relayed the idea that she was dead to the internet to protect her. It's unclear what bullying Meachin was subjected to, though as being online, it's kind of impossible to not be subjected to cruelty by someone somewhere. But between 2017 and 2020, Susan self-published 14 romance novels and novellas, and her fan base consisted of at least 700 Facebook members in a group, which I think is pretty impressive actually for a self-published author. I don't think I'd have 700 people read my book if I ever had one self-published, so I think that's kind of cool. After her alleged death, her Facebook group remained kind of active, with members of her family allegedly posting about her books. People had already got their suspicions that Susan wasn't dead, and there's a tweet that someone wrote which is quite funny, and it says, quote, "Her grammar seems to have improved significantly. It's possible she took a few courses, was dead though." I'm having a little bit of a laugh at this. They are not incidents of good behaviour. But this leads me into jumping into cases of severity to the point to the elephant in the room, Neil Gaiman, who, as of the 27th of January 2025, was dropped by his US publisher for his comics, the Dark Horse Comics. The publisher cancelled the Anansi Boys series after 7 issues following accusations of misconduct made against Gaiman by multiple women. HarperCollins, who publishes his books in the US, such as Coraline and American Gods,
has not dropped Gaiman, but it told Publishers Weekly that it didn't have any new books scheduled by Gaiman. Similarly, W. Norton, who publishes his North Mythologies book, has not dropped him, but has no future projects, and the same goes for Bloomsbury, Penguin, Hachette, DC Comics, and Titan. They actually haven't commented at all on the situation. Prime Video's Good Omens series will come to an end with just a single 90-minute episode instead of a full third season, and Disney paused the development of their adaptation of his book, The Graveyard Book. Additionally, Zinni Harris's musical adaptation of Coraline, which was due to tour the UK in 2025, has been cancelled. And I bet that was actually really good because Zinni Harris is one of my favourite playwrights at the moment. So I talked a lot in depth about the other examples of the authors behaving badly because their behaviours are tamed compared to what Gaiman has allegedly done. Obviously, there was a podcast series that was released about Gaiman's accusations in the summer, but then more recently, there was a publication of There Is No Safe Word, which was an article published by Lila Shapiro in the New York Magazine, which goes into very gritty detail of the things that he has done, allegedly. I found it primarily something which highlighted the power imbalance between fans and idols. The fall of authors in the eyes of their fans is not a new thing to the generation who grew up loving Harry Potter until J.K. Rowling was let loose on Twitter and had nothing to lose with her opinions. And yet, even when people are disappointed and hurt by many of the things Rowling stands for, millions continue to invest in products that she profits from going to the Harry Potter world to merchandise and things like that, because their love of the franchise trumps their disdain for her and her beliefs. And it's almost, I think, at a point where people think, well, she's not going to get any poorer, is she, if I stop investing in her? So I think people have just kind of given up. Now, as someone who owns many books by Gaiman and loves many books by Gaiman, I know I probably will read some of them again, but it's hard to call myself a fan anymore because what the hell was that about? Gaiman and Rowling are very much still alive and thus profits personally from any further involvement in their franchises, unlike authors like Marion Zimmer Bradley, the best-selling fantasy author whose golden-tinted reputation was shattered in 2014 when Moira Grayland, her daughter, accused her mother of having abused her as a child, calling her cruel and violent. Grayland said that she hadn't come out sooner for fear of her mother's fans, as they would be angry with her, and her mother had very much publicly championed for women's rights, despite abusing her own daughter. It's easier to separate the art from the artist when the artist is dead and can't really benefit from them. And even reading texts that you already own becomes sort of a tainted experience by those who have seen behind the veil. There's always ways to get around the ethics of consuming media in these circumstances. Charity shops and secondhand shops, for example, selling books, will profit from your purchase and not the author in these circumstances. And libraries are always an option, although in the UK, for example, and maybe other places, authors do oftentimes get paid for library loans. At the end of the day, there's no such thing as ethical capitalism. We can do the best that we can when we learn about certain areas that make us feel uncomfortable, but certainly there's no ethical judgment in this hellhole. It's all down to personal preferences and what people feel comfortable with. But the reason I started with talking about authors behaving badly in more less intense ways is the fact that I think because I was in the bookish industry online for many years, it really hit home this kind of sense that I have where I don't feel safe in the bookish community and I'm pretty privileged. But from what I saw and what I heard and what I experienced, I kind of became incredibly tainted from it. It put me off ever wanting to associate with people in the book industry entirely based from what I heard and what I saw. And we don't hear the good stories. We don't hear about the Ben Ockreys. We don't hear about the Sebastian Folks. I swear to God, if you two authors make this bloody video, Aged Like Milk, I swear to God, I'll come and get you myself. But you don't hear these good stories, and I don't feel like I'm part of a good community anymore. But I know I want to be part of the positive change. What I can particularly do is small and insignificant, but I know I'm working towards it. I'm working to try and help establish a more wholesome community and find my love of the literature and bookish world that I feel like has been really tainted over the past decade or so by bad actors and toxic communities that have profited off their toxicity. So I'm hoping to try and be part of the change. But I'm hoping that if there are writers out there who want to be part of that, I've got an email newsletter where I will be releasing things like that because I want to try and be a bit of a positive change, because hearing all this kind of negativity gossip online just makes me feel very sad and makes me feel really wary, and it takes me right back to like a decade ago where it was all I realised was a reality of the experience. I don't want that to be the norm. I kind of want to get back into it, but I'm scared. I'm genuinely scared. I haven't had good experiences in it for a long time. But I think the Neil Gaiman thing gave me a little bit of a shake for a wake-up call, going like, no, you are not damaging this. Like, you are not really pushing that gravestone into the ground and hammering it in, because I'm not letting that be the nail in the coffin to what, again, my view of the bookish world is like. But I hope you enjoyed this video. It's kind of a bit more I'm afraid, but thank you so much for watching. Thank you as always to my patrons for making this possible, and I will see you soon for another bookish-ish video. Remember, I have a form down below, a Google form, where you can send your requests in for anything you'd like me to discuss. But thank you so much, and I will see you soon for another video. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading.